Blog Talk Radio.
Despite this racism that exists in society, I'm saying I am happy in my life. And I don't I socialize with anyone. I don't care what race you are, because I know there are good white people. I know there are good black people. I know there are bad people of all different races. And I've always been like that. Even it was way before the military.
But you say that. Well, wait a minute. You say something else though. You say that you're a female and that you're gay, correct?
Yes, I am.
Now,
it should be another shot against me, right? I should be angry, right? I should be like, oh my God, I can't have these benefits. And I'm not that way.
No, according to the code, that means that the white supremacists have done their job.
All right, hey, their job works for me. Well, thank you, white supremacists.
Yes, that's the very point. And you say that you're, wait a minute, hold it, and you say that you're happy.
I am, and that's the truth. I'm happy.
Absolutely, and that fits the old-fashioned description of gay. Now,
there you go. Hey, check out my homepage.
Yeah, you're gay and you're happy. Wait a minute.
You got it right there.
Now, let's look at it. That's the very point. The first part of the discussion this evening was just about the effect that the white supremacists want to have on what they consider to be non-white people.
Context of white supremacy, Gus T Renegade and Justice in for another program to share constructive information on what racism, white supremacy is, and how it works. Thank you all for tuning into the broadcast. I hope it is constructive. I hope it gives you some information on how we can get justice rolling as soon as possible. I'm tired of being mistreated every day in all areas of people activity. Actually, just got out of a seminar with Matthew Fry Jacobson. If you've been a consistent listener of the Cows, he was on the program in September of 2009, and I was just in a seminar with him, and I actually got sandwiched. Two admitted racists, one female, one male, came and bookended me in terms of seatings. One of them actually got up and moved, switched seats so that they could sit next to me. Very interesting seminar. Go back and check out the program with Professor Jacobson. Very interesting. Today's program, real pleasure, privilege to be able to have our guest on today. I feel this is a critical topic, particularly for black people. The images that are coming out, I believe someone on a recent program said that they just saw a film that's supposed to be released with Martin Lawrence, and I believe the other black male actor was Jamie Foxx, where they're supposed to be in dresses. Any black person that feels this is a problem, that feels this is something that we should be concerned about and paying attention to, I hope you listen to this broadcast critically. I hope you go and get our guest book. Check out his website. It is linked in the description for this program. I feel this is vital information, and as I said, it is a privilege to have him on the program. He has authored at least 16 books, developed his own school in the state of Georgia. Incredible scholar, incredible author. As I said, profound honor to have him on the program with us. Our guest for today's program, Dr. Mwalimu K. Baruti. Dr. Baruti, are you with us?
Yes, I am, and it's good to be here. It's very good to be here, especially at this time, and people are calling a lot of things into question more openly than they were before, and I definitely appreciate that, and I appreciate the appreciation.
Thank you, sir. Your work invaluable. I want everyone to check your website. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly because it is linked in the description for the program. Is it Akobin?
It's Akobin.
Am I saying
Akobin?
Like, okay.
Let me see.
Akobin House.
Akobin House, and it's in the Dinker symbol. so people can also get the pronunciation if they look, in the Adinkra dictionary, but it's Akobin.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me. AkobinHouse.com. It is in the description. Please go there. You can see how to get many of his books. 16 of them are there. Excellent information. Please support AkobinHouse.com. Dr. Baruti, could you please share with our listeners, for folks who perhaps haven't checked out your website, have not read your material yet, could you just give a little background information about who you are, sir?
Certainly. I guess I'll start halfway there. My wife and our former college professors, we started a homeschooling program because the school that our daughter was at decided not to have a high school, and she was going to be in high school next year, and I received a dissertation fellowship which paid my salary for that year, so I decided to keep her at home, or we decided to keep her home with me. And the 3 other classmates that she had, their parents called and said, well, we hear that you're homeschooling, so could you take ours? And that was the beginning of this, even though this has been a lifelong dream for my wife. It was initiated in this way, somewhat, if you will, by accident. We have discovered that this is where we're more needed, so this is where we're at. Leaving the college environment, and in the college environment, I wrote when I had to. Once leaving there, the book just flowed, and that's, I guess you could say I've always loved to write, but the people in the community, when you, if you will, step down, if you will, and they feel that you are someone who they can talk to because you're now in their space more, then they will begin to ask you questions and bring up topics which require your attention in the best way that you can and with the talents that you've been given, and one of my talents is writing. So these books, they aren't, as some people may think, just an exercise in intellectualizing. These are books that were written to answer specific questions that came up in the community, specific concerns that came up in the community. So all of them are addressing that. We have had this homeschool now for homeschooling program. It's a full-time, so it's 8:30, 7 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. We have after-school folks. This is the 11th year of that, and we're celebrating some particular things this year, but one very important discovery, if you will, for us is that this is the first time in our 11 years that every single child has come from an African-centered family. So
wow.
We didn't have to waste the time that we normally do. I shouldn't say waste the time, because people come to you at different points in their lives, and they come to you for different reasons, and they know things that you don't know, and you don't know things that they don't know. So when people get sent to you and they're in an environment where they can be exposed to who they are, then that's a benefit. So it wasn't a waste of time. But it's very gratifying. And these people are coming, these where you have different aspects of being African-centered, but all of them are coming from African-centered families. And it is very gratifying not to have to explain to the children who they are, not to have to explain to them where they came from and who they are, and that they have a mission that's attached to their community in this world. That's at times, of course, children will be children, and you might have to repeat that message, but they're quite clear as to who they are. They're quite clear as to the level of privilege they have, not maybe resource-wise, but the level of privilege that they have because they have had in their lives access to information and ideas and truths that other people have not even had an inkling about. So this is a very exciting time in our lives. People are asking a lot of the right questions. The books are doing what they're supposed to do in the community, which I guess is another part of the statement, because the books, I'm assuming with any author, and of course I know that what happens when you assume, but I'm assuming with any author that they expect for their book to do something, that they expect for it to have kind of an impact. And we have been so pleased with the impact of our books and we have been so pleased that people have gotten what they need to get from them. So that also is something that's very gratifying here.
Outstanding. I'm eager to dive right in. Before I start any program, I always clear with my guests. You are a black male, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. This program, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy, and the definition that I use for racism and white supremacy is as follows. A global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that definition is accurate?
Again, I will say absolutely. And part of the problem, if I'm not interrupting anything, part of the problem is that most of us are completely and totally oblivious to that mental side that Bobby Wright talked about. One of our family friends, well, our family friends are the Cambones, Kamau and Mawia Cambone, and most folks from his statement at Howard University, even though he's been and she's been busy with this work for decades, he always says that, and he's an elder of mine, he always says that you should begin every discussion, every presentation to people with the fact that we are at war. And your statement was that statement, we are at war. Either we're going to win or we're going to lose. And we are up against a people who have repeatedly demonstrated that they intend in every way and through every means possible to remove us from planet Earth. So absolutely, I agree with the statement.
Most of the guests, oh my gosh, milestone program. This is the 100th broadcast of the C.O.W.S. Most of the guests who have been on the program have agreed that such a system does exist and that that definition is accurate. I wanted to, number one, I want to acknowledge that I am still learning. I am a victim of racism, white supremacy, and have been confused and given misinformation about many things. So if I am not accurately presenting information about your work, or if I'm not sharing information that you feel is pertinent to this topic, please feel free to stop me. I don't want my ignorance to in any way adversely impact the program, because I feel this is very important. I wanted to start kind of seeing if you could connect the dots in terms of things that are happening. I agree with what you said. Non-white people, the vast majority of non-white people seem to be confused about racism, white supremacy, and a result of that is that we don't connect the dots. This was an article, they were talking about President Obama's grandfather. He resided in Kenya. He experienced the so-called uprisings with the Mau Maus in the late 1940s and early 1950s. This is an online article, and they said that President Obama's grandfather said that these would be white people, so-called British white people. They would sometimes squeeze his testicles with parallel metallic rods. They also pierced his nails and buttocks with a sharp pin with his hands and legs tied together. They go on to say, according to the Harvard historian Caroline Elkins, there were reports of sexual violence and mutilation using castration pliers. In quotes, there was actually, I guess, an instrument that they termed castration pliers. This was an instrument devised to crush the men's testicles. I wanted to connect that with, I hope, what people know about what happened to the black male in New York, Mr. Abner Louima, who was sodomized by New York police officers, enforcement officials. They inserted a plunger in his rectum, nearly killing him. And connecting that with what happened with Emmett Till, 14-year-old black male, brutally murdered and castrated for whistling at a white woman, 1950s. and the images that I guess we see in films with Mr. Tyler Perry in dresses. I feel that all of these incidents are related. Do you think that's true, and could you kind of connect the dots for our listeners?
It's always amazing to me, and this is taking it off on a tangent because they are all connected, but this is a continuum. The things that you just mentioned, that extremely small number of things that you just mentioned, but extremely important collection of events that you just mentioned, if you go back and really study what happened to us in what in Tree we call the Notorious Code, which here and in the West they call the Middle Passage because that depoliticizes it. I mean, in this house there's a hallway that goes from the front of the house to the back of the house. You could call that a middle passage. The streets are a middle passage. So it takes away the politics of it. It takes away what it means or should mean to African people and what was done to us on that. What you just read is a litany of what went on day in and day out during that time, day in and day out during the period of our enslavement, continues day in and day out today. It's just that people have become more sophisticated in their assault against African people, and we, through menticide, have become, or cultural misorientation, however we want to state it, have become more sophisticated in pretending or acting like or rationalizing it as if it doesn't exist, if it isn't happening, if it isn't one nation of people trying to commit genocide against another nation of people who they see as a major threat. There's so much to this answer. We can start out with the idea of the African man being a threat to the European male, if you will, adult male. And this is and understood within the European patriarchal mind where men are the ones who engage in battle. And yes, that was primarily who engaged in battle in our traditional ancient societies, but women were also a major part of that, unlike in European society. So the men are perceived as a threat. They continue to be perceived as a threat. What has happened, in a nutshell, if you will, is that African men, as they were brought into European society, forced into this existence and made to believe that where we came from is not where we came from and not us, they have attempted to be accepted and become sub-assimilated, sub-integrated into European society, wherever it is. I mean, for me, when you're talking about European society, you're talking about European nation, whether you're talking about Australia, Azania, South Africa, the United States, Canada, England, Sweden, what have you. This is all one nation at work. You find the same condition. In fact, you find worse conditions for black men in England than you do here, and you find them worse than in England and Australia. Compared to what's being done to black men here, at least in terms of the prison system, Australia looks like hell, and this almost looks like heaven compared to what's being done in terms of the incarceration rate and the brutality against black men in the prison system there. But this has been a process where we have come to see their nation as our nation, and the goal has been acceptance. I say sub-assimilation because your assimilation or integration implies that there is this equality and there's an exchange and everything comes out on the same even level and the same playing field, and that is not what is happening. We get sub-assimilated and sub-integrated into their society. That force and that instilled, socialized, internalized need to have Europeans love us has moved us in the direction of changing who we are to be more acceptable to them, to be more conducive to their perceptions of us, to make it so that we're no longer threatening to them. So we move from being warriors to being shuffling toms, to being sub-integrationalists, trying to go to bed with the enemy's daughters to take care of their daughters, to being males who were effeminized and no longer pose a threat. Nathan here and Julia here made the statement, it's not your clothes they don't like. It's not, your car they don't like. It's not your house they don't like. It's not your whatever. It's you they don't like, and we don't get that. So we have attempted with all of our energy to become acceptable to them, for them to love us. And the driving instrument behind that has been our masculinity. That was the part that was the greatest threat. So we have moved in the direction of becoming less of a masculine threat to them. The final stage, or at least the stage right now, it's not the final stage, but the stage that we're going through now with this is the Effeminization process, the homosexualization process, where because of the behaviors that we are taking on, or some of us, I gotta stop saying we, some of us are taking on as these threatening men, is that posture that's least threatening to them. And I can give you an example which began my thinking along these lines. Before then, it wasn't even an issue, because I wasn't, not that I wasn't privy to this existing, it just was not something that I really paid attention to because it was so insignificant. When my wife and I were in graduate school, every year they would have these colloquiums where you had this wine and cheese and dinner, and all of the black students would come together to meet those who saw themselves as black, would get together and meet each other. We were at the University of Chicago, and less than 0.5% of all the graduate students were black. We went to this colloquium, and we were senior graduate students. So we walked in, everybody knew our name. We didn't spend a lot of time on campus. Everybody knew our name, knew who we were, what departments we were in, blah, blah, blah. So I noticed that the women were on one side, and I was going to say boys, but no, the men were on the other side. And I said, wow, this reminds me of, way back when a elementary school dance, where, the wallflowers on each side. So I went and talked to the sisters. And I said, how you all doing? They had a wonderful conversation. And I said, okay, well, can you tell me what's going on here? Why are all the women over here and all the men over there? And one of the sisters, and I didn't take it personally, and she wasn't saying this to me, she said, what men? I said, okay, let me take my lead. I walked over to the brothers, and they knew who I was too, and they said, hi, how you doing? How's it going? They had these really soft voices, these soft mannerisms. If I'd been paying attention, I would have seen the soft stances. I was very angry. The wife saw it at the same time, so we left, went back to married student housing. I went down the hall to my friend's room, and I said, man, what's going on? And I used the word, I continued to use the word, it was good enough for my father, good enough for me. I said, what are all these fags doing here? And he said, they're not homosexual. He said, they have been effeminized. They have removed what they consider to be the threat to Europeans from their being, from their very essence. They're not faking it, they're not playing this game. This is what they have made themselves into, because they see the European as having the power. They want to have a piece of that power. They want to be accepted into those circles, and they know that the European will not accept them into these circles if they act like they're men. Then I begin to look around and begin to see this on virtually all of the campuses in the graduate schools. And that's not all of the men. They were ample, like, myself and the brother in the dorm, in married student housing, but it was like growing as a trend. And I hadn't noticed it. It was happening right before my face. And I hadn't noticed it because I didn't spend a lot of time on campus.
Wow.
That scared me. That really scared me, because I'm when you're a social scientist, one of the main things that you do is you try to forecast, you try to predict where trends are going to take you. Where's, okay, you see this in the prison system 20 years ago, this 10 years ago, this now. Where's that trend? What is the trajectory of that? And when I begin to look around and see this, the trajectory scare me. And what I'm seeing today match. I'm not this statistician type person, but they match what I expected to see today. You have, in the social science we have, you have a positive correlation where you have this line, this regression line, which shows that there's a relationship between two things, and if there's a positive relationship, that line goes up. what I have seen within the last 10 or 15 years really has been what we call a curvilinear regression, where the line doesn't just, go up as a positive relationship. It starts to skyrocket. So within a very short period of time, it covers the change in, let's say, 10 years, which should have taken 80 or 90 years to cover. So we're in the midst of a process that has taken on a life of its own, because being African or being black is a problem. So people don't want to be associated with each other based upon race. We've been convinced of that. The desire to be and act like Europeans, because they are the ones who are supposed to have power, has taken on with our children like crazy. And the images that they see, taking it to Tyler Perry, who stopped traffic for, I believe, 4 square blocks here when he opened up shop here in Atlanta. It has taken off at an incredible level. And it's not just the mothers who are doing this, and there's a lot of fault to lay there. It's a lot of the fathers who are part of this process too, by what they're doing and what they're not doing. This, I hear mothers say, and this is only because I don't talk to fathers too much about this. I don't interact with them at this level because most of the people I see when I'm dealing with students are the mothers. And those who will end up not having their children here anyway, because they know what we're about, they will say, oh, I'm not trying to, raise my son into this man thing. I just want him to be a good person. And so you just negated the whole concept of manhood. You said that a grown man can be everything that a woman's supposed to be. So there's this is natural. The question for us in terms of this trajectory is, where is it going now? What is the next stage of this? And I think that I have some pretty good ideas on it. And, of course, whenever I talk about them, I just say the same thing my mother used to say to me whenever I wouldn't believe something that she was telling me. She said, mark my word. And the things that I marked my word on before, people were saying, oh, yeah, you said that. I said, yes, I did say that. These folks are not playing with us. They want us removed. The problem now is going to be when folks realize that it's not our mannerisms that they don't like. It's not the masculinity that they don't like, even though they're deathly afraid of it. Okay, they're as afraid of African women as they are of African men. That's got nothing to do with it. It's us they don't like. So no matter what we do, no matter how we change our posture, no matter how many times, as they say, you walk without moving your butt cheeks, it doesn't make a difference what you do. You're going to still be a problem. And you're going to have to try to find even greater and greater ways to make yourself into what you are not. Invisible man, he's not dead. He's very alive within our community.
Wow.
If someone were to ask me in a general way, how do you correct this? Well, we have to begin to look at ourselves and look into ourselves and look toward ourselves for definitions of who we are. As long as we're looking to somebody else for validation, as long as we're looking to somebody else for, approval and to maybe lend us some of their power, then they're going to take us exactly where they want us to be. And that is in a subservient position or dead.
Again, our guest for today's program, author of Homosexuality and the Effeminization of Afrikan Males, Dr. Mwalimu K. Baruti. I wanted to throw in one more example that I think, another illustration of the exact same trend in the system of white supremacy, bullfighting. The bull is killed and castrated. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. I think throw that in. That fits exactly with Abner Louima, the example that I read of President Obama's grandfather, Emmett Till, and I think it ties right into Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's theory of white genetic annihilation. Do you think her theory, do you think that helps to explain why white people would be doing this, attacking black masculinity, sometimes focusing explicitly on black male testicles and genitalia?
The ISIS Papers is a masterpiece. I don't think that it needs to stand alone per se. I mean, we've got when you began that statement, you started out with the matador and the bull, and that's Bobby E. Wright is a major part of that discussion, and there are others that are a major part of that discussion. And I have a few minor issues with Europeans responding in us in a particular way because we push them off of the continent, if you will, and they're angry with their mother. Even though if that works for some people, that's fine with me. What's important is that they understand that there's an issue, that there's a problem. But her theories and the ISIS paper is full of some wonderful ones. I think that they're very appropriate. They have an enormous explanatory power in terms of why Europeans are targeting not just black males, particular aspects of the black male. Their fixation on the penis it's one of the things that she touches on, and she doesn't touch on it, that she deals with. And a lot of people, I don't think, delve deeply enough into it, is to the sexual center of their psychological analysis. We know about Freud, but most folks don't understand what he said about white folks and why he focused on every psychotic and neurotic state as being somehow having a sexual origin and somehow being sexually determined or sexually determinate in Europeans. Francis Cress Welsing has done a wonderful job of using analogies to help people to understand that it's more to this than just that's whatever's dangling from you and they saw it and just decided to snatch that off because they didn't have anything else to grab. They understand their absence, and I'm trying not to repeat what she said, but they understand their absence. They understand their genetic recessiveness. They understand that they lack, that white means that you are absent of color. And when you're dealing with children, then you're dealing with children who have a lot of destructive toys and have a lot of power. Then you're dealing with a people who seek to destroy whatever it is they feel is giving someone else power and not giving them power. And they hope to, in the process, as she said, ingest that power somehow so that they can claim it, so that they can have it, so that they can be what it is that they know that they can never possibly be. So the targeting of the men's penis, genitalia, all the rest of that, that's understandable because that's the great thing to them. Of course, it's also interesting, and I would argue that this doesn't fit within her theory as well, and she doesn't need to explain everything. She absolutely doesn't need to explain everything. She's explained enough. The way that European males, as they colonized the world, what they did to African women and indigenous women in this land's vaginas. A lot of people don't know that on the saddle you have that horn in the front of the saddle, even though it's used for holding on, etc., etc. When they went out to kill indigenous people because they were paid, the same thing went on in Australia, they were paid for however many that they killed. They would cut out the vagina. They would cut out the part, I would say, an inch in, all the way around, and they would hang that over those hooks on the front of the saddle, and they would bring them back, and that would be the body count in terms of how they got paid, because you know that if you cut that off of a woman, you know she's dead. They did the same thing in Australia. We forget Leopold's soldiers, when they went out to do their damage, to do their dirt, they would cut the breasts off of African women, and they would take the fat out of it, and they would let it dry, and they would put buttons or zippers on it, and they turned them into purses. So while the focal point on the black male is his penis, on the black female is everything that has to do with reproduction also. The difference is, and Cress Welsing brought this out exceptionally well, and I hope that I'm not misstating her, is that the male's penis was where the color was injected into the vagina. And this is what they were trying to stop. And they wanted the power from this. So I don't have any problem whatsoever with Cress Welsing's theories. And we might have a difference here and there on the ages that people should be getting married, and I dealt with that in complementarity. I don't disagree on terms of the maturity, but I disagree in terms of the weight. We need to focus more energy, as far as I'm concerned, on making the people more mature so they don't have to wait versus having them wait so that they can get the maturity.
Understood. I want to definitely give the address again. I'm going to try and do it as often as I can during the broadcast. AckelbenHouse.com. That's where you can go, and please support Dr. Baruti. You can get Homosexuality and the Effeminization of Afrikan Males, as well as many of his other titles. Please support and get his work. Also, I definitely am familiar and thoroughly learned a lot from Bobby E. Wright, author of Psychopathic Racial Personalities and Other Essays. Fantastic work. I would highly recommend it to folks listening to the broadcast. You talk about how, under the system of white supremacy, the educational system is set up to maintain racism, to maintain white domination. And you have a portion in your book where you talk about the confusion of the Negro intellectual. Can you explain how miseducation is supposed to aid this process of effeminization and homosexuality amongst black males?
Oh, I would say in a number of ways miseducation does. And in fact, I tend not to say miseducation anymore. I tend to say diseducation. I believe that Carter G. Woodson was 190% on point, and I'm not just saying that all these people are on point because it makes them sound good because of names everybody know, but I recognize them as being on point. At that particular point in time, Carter G. Woodson couldn't have been more correct. People would be being given information, ideas, technology, if you will, intellectual technology that did not fit our needs, that it would direct us to where, why do we need Greek and to be masters of Latin or what have you? It had nothing to do with what we needed to build at that time. Now I would argue that it has moved beyond miseducation and has evolved into diseducation. Diseducation, to me, means that you are making people not even wanting to think. So the idea of thinking has become abhorred. We see that very clearly in our children, where thinking is equated with work, and work is something that they have been taught is something for inferiors. It's not something that they want to do. It's something that is for inferiors. So the idea of thinking is a working process. In addition, they have been taught through the media and through the arrogance of spoilage, which is not their doing, that no one can tell them anything. One of the elders who made his transition about a year and a half ago, he made the point, you can't tell them anything. Of course, we have children who you can, but he's speaking in general. So when no one can tell you anything and you think that you know everything already, then your thinking process is already severed. So the diseducation part is that we have a large collection of people who essentially know nothing but what they're fed by a media that's trying to destroy them, and they think that regurgitating this is thinking. So thinking has been redefined as just the regurgitation of whatever it is that you've heard. And of course the experts there still are not us. they still, I remember teaching a college course, and I forgot what I was talking about, but this student, one of our sons, asked me for evidence from a white scholar. And I'm like, this is at an HBCU. And
wow.
Asking me, there were a number of things that really surprised us. One of the main things we saw, and I'm trying not to get off track, but one of the main things that we saw was that this is directly related. This is directly related. Because, and my wife was the first one to notice this, because they have not been given our story. They don't know our history. They don't know what really happened to us. They don't know how we got to this point. They don't know why we have this range of color in our community, which was not a result of volunteering anything. It was a matter of systematic rape over 12 generations and across the ocean and into the dungeons and on the coffin. This was systematic rape, which is how we have this range of color. She discovered that she's trying to explain to them about the moral value of African people, about how, a few decades ago we considered ourselves to be morally superior to Europeans, particularly in the areas of sexual behavior. But because they were never taught about this, because they're not aware of this, their whole conception of the way things should be is based upon what we see now, because this is the way that they believe that it's always been. If you have no conception whatsoever of history or our story, then what you see today is all you know, and you naturally assume, this is the way that it's always been. Homosexuality has always been a part of the African community. All of these things just seem normal because this is what you see, and this is what the media pushes. Retrogressive, and it even does cowboy movies where there was homosexuality in our community. Even goes back to movies from 200, 300, 400 years ago, and there's homosexuality in our community just like it's in our community today. So without a knowledge of the way things have been, which is a function of those people who are in the position to make what needs to be known. When you talk about Negroes and Negro intellectuals, their loyalty is not to African people. It can't be to African people, because if it was, then they wouldn't be in the positions that they're in. Between really about 1990, but a little bit before, in 2000, there was a systematic movement across the country to remove, quote-unquote, radical revolutionary scholars from academia. And you saw evidence of this all across the country, where people like me, who spoke an African truth, their lives were either made so miserable they quit, or there was a reason found to fire them. This went on systematically across the country. It wasn't just at the school that I was at, where I saw at least one faculty leave every year. It was systematic because this country and our community, along with the Negro leadership, it's like the Negro leadership, misleadership had been pushed to the side with the 60s and 70s movements, and the keeping that information or keeping that thrust down made it so that people thought that we had made it. Once this occurred, then you don't need radicals, which is a misnomer because all of us think that. But you don't need radicals. You don't need revolutionaries. So that was the time where you begin to see these Negroes come into positions of intellectual influence, where they begin to receive the chairs. And there was a lot of retirement and transitions among those of us who had dedicated our lives to this. And these individuals were not replaced with other revolutionaries, with other warriors. They were replaced with Negroes. So the dominant themes, the dominant conversations within academia, in the Africana Studies programs, in the African American Studies programs, in the Black Studies, in the sociology, in the anthropology, in the chematology, these are Negroes for the most part. And their job, the Negro's job, pure and simple, the Negro's job is to validate white supremacy. His job is to get as many crumbs as he can, if we put it in simple terms, to get as many crumbs as he can, and to make sure that those people who come under him and through him have the correct Negro mentality, because if they don't, he won't keep his job for long, because the people who have him under their thumb expect him to do the work of only sending them, of only training other Negroes. So you come into the class and you're writing a paper about Nat Turner or Bookman, and you're correcting what have you, and you want to put a check on homosexuality, what have you, you're not going to make it through the school. There was a beautiful example of this in, I believe it wasn't Man-Child in the Promised Land, which interestingly has some homosexual themes in there and some love of white folks themes in there. You had to go back and read this stuff. I don't think it was Black Boy. It might have been Native Son, but this young man was in college, and I believe it was Tuskegee. I'm not sure, but he messed up. He did something really, really bad, so he got kicked out of the school. And either the president of the school or some high-ranking official in the school, who was a family friend or what have you, called him to his office. He gave him a letter to take to New York, where he was going to be looking for a job, and this was a letter of introduction. He went to New York, got a job. He later found out that the letter said, "Keep this nigger running." That's all the letter said. To me, when I read that, my mind said, Negro. He knows his job. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do in service to white supremacy. He doesn't have any questions about it. We have all kinds of people. We got what I call lost souls, people who don't bring me to politics. I don't want to hear anything about that. I don't really want to associate with you because they probably coming to kill you, and I don't want to get killed in the process. Let me watch my soap, so whatever else comes along. Those are what my mother called lost souls. But then you have another category, and there are numbers of different categories within them and around them. But this other category is of Negroes, and Negroes know that their job is to destroy Africans. They know what they're here for, and they don't care. And they do the job of destroying Africans with great relish. And we're confused because they look like us. Okay, just like many of us would be confused if we looked at Clarence Thomas. Okay, but these individuals look like us, and they're very nepotistic in terms of who they hire and who they keep around. You have to prove yourself well if you want to be a good Negro and receive the benefits from this. And their job is to present European culture, European traditions as our ideal, as the way we're supposed to be. And that's a major part of the point that I think people need to understand now. This is European society and culture. We call it America, we can call it Australia, we can call it whatever we want to, but they are one nation. They have never left their traditions. They may have hidden them for a period of time when they started dealing with people, because they knew, how people will respond to you if it's a family-centered, child-centered society and you're a pedophile or you're a pedophile. You're not going to make any inroads in trade, your religion, or anything else. So knowing that this is what these people are, and you want to, sometime in the future, you want to dominate them and control them and take their resources, or in fact have them in such a state of mind that they would be more than willing to give you their resources, then you can't come in with that. It means you have to hide your nature. And they did this very well, but they never left their traditions, particularly in what I call Old Europe, which is the norm European society, Sweden, England, Norway, all the rest of it. That's Old Europe. This is what we're living in, is New Europe. Australia is part of New Europe, but it's all still one nation. So they hid these things from us. As we became more entwined with them in terms of being with them so long and being disconnected from who we were and being susceptible to ideas of black inferiority and white superiority, then they were able to begin the process of schooling us into what they needed us to be, into that backdoor mentality that Carter G. Woodson talked about. They did this not only in the areas of economics, which is really evident in our community, and politics was evident in our community. They also did this in the area of sexual behavior, and that institution, if you will. So they are, as I like to say, we are in school. And right now, we're probably like maybe in middle school, getting ready to graduate to high school, if you're talking about an educational career that goes in the postdoctorate. in terms of our approximating their sexual insanity. Okay, that's how far we still have to go, but this is also how far we have come. Homosexuality, in terms of it being accepted, is probably like right in the middle of that educational career.
Mm-hmm.
And what we don't do when we're assessing, because people always ask, "Where, this is about as bad as you can get." And I said, "No, it's not." And okay, well, what's next? Where are we going? If you really want to understand what's going to happen when we get to college, then you have to look at Europeans in their classic society. You have to look. People, when you say a classic society, just like when you say classic African society, that's when we were our best. That's when you could look at us and see the quality of our character at the spiritual level. You could see our greatness, if you will, when you're talking about a people's classic society or classic civilization. So if you want to know where Europeans are trying to take us, are in the process of taking us, then you have to look at classic Roman and Greek society. And classic Roman and Greek society, in terms of sexual behavior, were primarily pedophilic. The primary form of relationship was homosexuality, and the primary form of homosexual relationships was between an adult and a child, primarily a man and a boy. So right now, all you hear is the homosexuals, because they know where they're trying to take us, and some of them aren't even denying it. But they know that we're not ready for that quite yet. We're still just starting high school. So they know that that's something that would turn us instantly away from them and turn us into people who would see them as not this innocent gay thing that they want us to see. And gay, of course, is a very political word. So they're in denial that they're pedophiles. They're in denial that homosexuality is pedophilic in its nature. But if you want to know where we're going, where they're trying to take us, back to who they are, then you got to look at their classic society. And that tells you the word. It's like the difference between what somebody says and what somebody does. You can go back and you can look at how they have moved us. There was a process of moving us toward the acceptance of homosexuality that began with the rape and was accelerated in the 60s and 70s with the sexual revolution, which really was aimed at white women, but we were caught up in it too. So this is taking us to a particular place. They have moved us in the talk shows to where incest is rapidly becoming no longer an issue. They have opened up the prisons to allow the rape to occur. There is so much rape going on now that it's not funny. Trains are not even talked about anymore in terms of the rape of girls and the rape of women. I've talked to female homosexualized African females who see their life's mission as turning out African girls, turning them into homosexuals.
Wow.
We look around the world, all of the child stealing, people call it adoption, all of the child stealing that Europeans are doing around this planet, all of the judges in the court system who are handing our children over to not only European individuals and couples, but also to openly homosexual European couples. It's a whole other discussion why I really don't like to say homosexual Europeans, because to me to say European is to say homosexual based upon their story. It's like as a social science, you want to find out what a people are about, their priorities, what they love, what they don't like, then you follow them historically. And if there's something that you consistently find in a people's behavior and in their environment and in their work from the beginning of their, I don't want to say civilized, social existence, and that exists now, then you know that characterizes them. And you find homosexuality back into the case. So this has always been a part of them. You find bestiality all the way back into the caves. This is a part of them. So for me, it's to say European is to say homosexual. And some people will want to argue with that because their best buddy is blah, blah, blah. Well, in that case, you do have some Europeans who are in denial. You do have some closet homosexuals within the European community. I don't think you have any within the African community. And that's why when I talk about Africans who behave homosexually or in an effeminate fashion, I say that they are homosexualized Africans or effeminized Africans, because this is something that happened to them. This isn't normal or natural to their being.
Wow. Again, our guest for today's program, author of Homosexuality and the Effeminization of African Males, Dr. Mwalimu K. Baruti. You talked about how this is a process and how you have observed this conditioning, this programming take place. I think a big part of that programming is through entertainment. And in your book, you have a portion where you talk about the production of effeminate African elites. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people, they look at the Tyler Perry films, and yes, that is obvious illustration of what we're talking about. But there is a long history of this sort of thing with black entertainers. I know Martin Lawrence is, as I said at the beginning of the broadcast, he's supposed to be doing a film with Jamie Foxx, I believe, where they're going to be in dresses. His sitcom, The Martin Show, he was famous for playing a female, Shanae, being in a dress. Flip Wilson on his program, one of his famous characters, being in a dress. Richard Pryor, the film The Toy with Jackie Gleason, he was not only bought by a white child to be a toy, he started out the film as a maid in a dress serving chicken to white men. Eddie Murphy in a dress for The Nutty Professor. Damon Wayans and David Alan Grier in Living Color, the sitcom back in the early 90s. One of their famous sketches was them playing gay males. Can you talk about how you've kind of seen this process in terms of entertainment with black males?
Well, we can start out with understanding how attached we are to the media. I always look at our attachment to the media as being more of a drug than for anybody else. People who are systematically oppressed, they tend to systematically look for outlets. And there's a reason why we're more connected, us being more emotional naturally than other people, if you will. It makes it easier for that to happen. But the fact that, and Browder talked about it in the Browder Files, a number of people have talked about it. Browder mentioned 70 hours of television time a week. You know, that's like 10 hours a day. We're sitting up in front of this thing, and games and the movies and all the rest of this. So it is the primary mechanism of socialization, not just the TV, but media. Period. Entertainment. Period. It's interesting to me. This is another aside that the comedy is more directed toward us than anyone else. And it's almost like the saying that you laugh so much to keep from crying, because what is happening to us is far from funny. But to make it appear, or to make us allow us to live with this, and to make it so that we can continue to operate like we are living versus just surviving, then comedy plays a very critical role in this. When I was a child, all of the black boys on the block either wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or a police officer or a spy, because those were the shows that were on. I Spy, Market Wealthy, these were the shows that were on. Starsky and Hutch, this was what you saw. And these were the models for what we want to be. And people sit up in denial now that, I'm just an individual and I'm going to be what I want to be, and no one is influencing that except for me. Like some people walk around talking about, I don't practice anybody's culture. These images influence all aspects of our lives. So you see a little boy looking through XXL or The Source or Vibe magazine, and the next thing you know, if he's got the money, he's going to look like somebody in there. Just like back in the day, we would look at GQ magazine and we would be trying to look like what was in these magazines. So the images that are portrayed, they are portrayed in such a way that these are images of success. This is what is hip. This is what will make you cool. Of course, in order for you to have that, you must have a weakened personality that looks outside of itself in order to be itself. So you have raised through now increasingly spoilage, but also before through powerlessness, a people or a significant part of a people who were needy, who were very needy in terms of wanting to be appreciating, needing other people to give them approval constantly, not knowing that Europeans are the ones who need approval more than anybody else, but needing approval. And when you train a people to be needy, to need approval, then you can regulate and control what it is that they want to wear, what it is that they want to eat, and what kind of a person they want to be like. When you have a growing significant number of people who are the number one people in entertainment or sports or what have you who are homosexualized, well, then why would it make sense for a child who wants to become successful to see that as a problem, especially when there's nothing in that society that says anything that's wrong with that? In fact, everything in that society is seeing that is correct. There's so many aspects of this. I look at the generation gap where in the West, and that's not part of our tradition. Oba Tashaka brought that out very well in the book. This is not part of our tradition. What you have in the West is this complete rebellion from the parents, the idea of trying to be the exact opposite of what they are. And this helps to feed, through the media, the direction that the rebellion of these past two generations, if you will, particularly the past one, have taken. And the target has been heterosexuality. They've used that as the thing that you most don't want to be like with your parents. The thing that makes them the squares is that their sexual lives are so limited and so abnormal, and that you want to have all this excitement and continuous, and of course this was fed before that by sexual excess, which was brought in the 60s and the 70s. So the idea of homosexuality as being abnormal is losing, of course it never had it in European culture and society, but is losing its thrust in terms of it being a problem, in terms of it being an issue, and in fact it is taking on the exact opposite because it is being promoted. Oprah did some serious damage to the idea of homosexuality as being a problem in our community. She did some major damage to that as a problematic concept. I remember a show where she had where this black male who was married to this white female, which of course is extremely problematic from the get, but she had been dressing up their son in girl stuff, had been putting on his fingernails because he had decided, and we pretend that this doesn't happen within a social context even though we want to argue that everything else does, that he wanted to be a girl. So mom, against dad's wishes, had gone ahead and done this. So he, and I don't know what kind of fool would do this in the first place, but had volunteered to come on Oprah to defend his position. Anybody with sense should know better than to try to defend a position that is anti-European on a show like Oprah's show. Oprah spent the entire show working with the audience to convince this black male that he was wrong for trying to make his son grow up to be a man. And they finally convinced him that he was wrong for doing this. And you see this on all of these shows. We have to understand, if Oprah says, read this book, the sales of that book skyrocket. If Oprah says, go to this restaurant and buy this particular food, the restaurant can't take care of all the business that's coming to it. So these people have been put in positions of authority and influence in the media by other people who are higher up, much higher up than them, and we follow suit because they're supposed to be the authorities on who we are and what we're supposed to be about. Of course, the image of the black man as a black man has to be destroyed, and we've had a whole collection of those who would prefer to be a maid on television than be a maid in real life. We have an enormous number of them. The Wayans, you go down the list, all those names that you just mentioned, all of these individuals, their loyalty is not to us. one of the things that John Henry Clark harped on all the time, the absence of accountability in our community. And if you don't have accountability that is meaningful, that can be enforced, then if you don't have control of the resources and control over everything else, or don't have a vision of that, then you can't keep people loyal. You can't make people want to be who they are and who you are. So this Hollywood thing is naturally taking us to where they want us to be through our children. The adults aren't the target. The children are the target. You can change the children. If you change the children, you change one generation of children, let's know 2 generations of children, then the discussion is over. Because your truth will be their truth, and that's the only truth they'll know, and that's what they're going to teach to their children. And then if you come to them with anything that doesn't jibe with that, like you are an African or these are your traditions, then you're the one that's going to be crazy, because they know that what they have been taught by the truth. The media would never. I remember being in, another example, in teaching a class in college and arguing, well, not really arguing, but because to me it was kind of funny. This guy was talking about this study where we were talking about interracial relations. And this guy was talking about this study. He said, yeah, well, there's a study that says that Asian girls, Asian women have the best sexual fit with black men. And the study showed that second to Asian women, white women have a better sexual fit with black men than black women. And, and I'm trying not to laugh, because you don't want to laugh at students. I'm trying not to laugh, and I'm saying, okay, where did this come from? And another guy on the other part of the class, yeah, I heard that too. And I said, okay, where did this come from? And they said, oh, we saw it on the Ricky Lake show. And I'm like, this is your evidence? And they're looking at me like they're in disbelief that I would have a problem with that as a source. So their sources are not us. So it's like telling them anything, and it will work. There was a gathering, a panel lecture thing at Spelman, and one of the elder sisters in the community went, and she left after being there for a while because she discovered that this was a really lesbian focus. And one of the main arguments, she said, there was presented in this speech where this young sister got up and said, well, we're all bisexual because we have a mother and a father. That is, the logic there is so insane. But guess what? She said people stood up to applaud.
Wow. Because
you're looking for anything to support your insanities. You're looking for anything, no matter how stupid it may sound, to support your aping alien ways. And again, we come back to the problem. Where is this taking us? Where is it going in terms of what kind of people we're going to be when we are in a state of total denial of who we are, when we absolutely become someone else? Well, I'll put it like this. When we become what they want us to become so that they can play with us even more, because then we'll think that we're responsible for creating the game. The idea of homosexuality coming out of Africa, it'll be something that we think that we did and that we should continue and escalate, but it's like somebody else is up in the box watching it go on and getting ready to come down and join the fun and be the serious predator, while everybody else is thinking that they have nothing to do with it, and they have everything to do with it.
Wow. Again, our guest for today's program, Dr. Mwalimu K. Baruti. Please check the website, AkobenHouse.com. It's linked in the description for the program, AKOBEN House.com. The books are there. Please support Dr. Baruti. I wanted to pick out one more, because I think this is, again, people focus a lot of attention on Tyler Perry. Will Smith, just glancing over some of his films, Bad Boys, just focusing on boys there. 7 Pounds, where basically the climax and plot of the film is him killing himself so that he can help all these other people. I Am Legend, again, him killing himself so that white people might live. Hancock, him getting as much distance as possible from the white woman. He actually ends up on the moon, I believe. He's not even on Earth anymore. And 6 Degrees of Separation, where he actually has a scene of so-called homosexual activity with a white man. 6 Degrees of Separation. That's just some of Will Smith's projects. In your book, you talk about single parenting and single mothers and how they oftentimes end up with effeminate sons. And you mentioned some of the examples, and I know Mr. Neil Fuller Jr., I spoke with him, and he talked about some of the ways that this plays out is that single moms, black females, will try to shield their black male children from being abused in the system of white supremacy by effeminizing them. They'll do things like giving them effeminate names. Tracy, which is, a female name, and they'll name their male son Tracy. And I hope Tracy Morgan, I hope people will pay attention to his films a little more closely now. Can you kind of share your view on that, please, sir?
Well, we are part of a process of creating confusion as to who is what is the correct gender, what is gender correct behavior, what is gender correct what have you. And I know that within this society is dictated by European norms for the most part, but it's still within a cultural context. When things begin to go the other way, it's obvious that something is going on. We do have to realize, and that's where I say we really can't go around pointing fingers at the sisters, and you were not. We can't go around pointing fingers at the brothers. We all share in this. There are degrees of weakness everywhere, and when you are systematically oppressed, destroyed, trying to find some peace, there's a reason why African women, the number one killer is hypertension and blood pressure, because this system does that. We consistently find, and we can take this back to a child-centered society. For us, for African people, where children are the most important. That's a whole other discussion in and of itself. But there's so much evidence of our priority of children and their safety, our love of them and our elders. When you have women who are like this to the bone, then in the ignorance of what this can do, and in the idea that I would prefer for my child to be a slave than to be a warrior or revolutionary or what have you, then you have, and when you have the changing of the priorities from character, which was the first and foremost priority in every traditional African society that I have studied, the development of the character of the child, when you switch that priority of character for priority of money, for priority of things, for a materialistic priority, then the goal becomes not only to get this child in a position where he is acceptable by this society so that they will more than likely offer him more of the crumbs, but your priority also becomes for your child to be, well, it's in the same thing, for your child to be, it doesn't need to be elaborated in that way, for your child to be the least possible threat that he can be. And African women, black women, African men, black men know several things, whether subconsciously or in day-to-day conversation. They know in their mind that Europeans will kill for nothing. Our parents are deathly afraid that their child will go and do and say something that will end them up in the prison system, that will end them up at the end of a rope, that will end them up at the end of a gun, that will end them up on the street. They are very, very afraid. I think we're more afraid of that than anybody else because we're so close to it, and we see it all the time, that our child will end up on drugs, seriously on drugs, and that'll be the end of his or her life. So that survival mother-father thing kicks in, where you will do whatever you think will allow your child to survive in this world with the least amount of confrontation with this system that's trying to kill them. My mother used to say, you don't spoil a child to be raised up in a world that's going to try to kill them. So you turn that child, while you are mandated to spoil your child, you want to spoil your child in such a way that they will be readily unacceptable, and no one will see them as a threat as they're coming. So you do things that take away their manhood by default. And then when you have a whole collection of this going on, it does not seem odd whatsoever. So you know this is a long discussion. You remove the man, you remove the man from the home. You make that the most difficult thing for him to be. And if he is in the home, then he needs to be pacified. You make the mother so dependent on the system that they know that if they raise this child wrong, they can lose that. Not only can they lose what they're receiving, but they can also lose that child to the system. I'm not talking about welfare. I'm talking about job, whatever it is that you have. Family. Okay, the way that family responds to someone who decides that they want to be African-centered within our community, it's just you being your individual self, right? But their response is, I do it to the students all the time here when they want to, well, before this year, when they want to talk about being individual and it doesn't make a difference. I say, okay, you can go to your public school, dress up like you're Hindu. You can go to your school, dress up like you're indigenous. You can go dress up like you're a Goth. You can go dress up any way you want to. You can even go speak in that language. But see what happens when you go dressed up like an African, like a traditional African. See how different the response is. Go and speak an African language and see how different the response is in this place where they're talking about being individual. So the appreciation and acceptance is for everything except that which is African. Mothers know that for their sons, and they know that their sons are the greatest threat. They know that their sons are perceived of as the greatest threat. Now, I guess logically you'd have to say, if I was brought up in a world and I had children, and I wanted my children to be successful in this world and to thrive and to live, and it was only me or it was only a community like me, then my job is to make these children, make them so that their lives could be long, as happy as possible, with the least amount of want as possible. And if this society dictates to me that if I raise a boy into a man, they're going to kill him, they're going to castrate him, they're going to imprison him, they're going to find a way to get him on drugs, they turn him into a drunk, they're going to find a way to keep him from receiving the education that he needs, then I'm not going to raise my child that way, especially if I operate in fear. And fear doesn't have to be a conscious thing, but especially if I operate in fear. Today, the most successful, or increasingly the most successful adult black males are those who are gender confused, those who are feminized, those who are soft, those who are least likely to have the mannerisms, the behavior, the thought, the attitude of a man, especially of a man who is at war and who recognizes the assault of white supremacy or attempted white supremacy against us. Those are the ones who are sought out to be destroyed, to set examples of. If all around you, every black male who decided that he wanted to be a man is being destroyed, you don't want your boy to be raised like that. You want your boy to live. That's logical for mothers. You know, they want their children to live. It's changing in a way within the drug culture. As a friend of mine said a number of years ago, crack is the first thing that's been able to separate African women from their children, and that has been a goal. Just like prison the solitary confinement in prison is the first time that you have been able to break the spirit of some black men, which has been the goal. but it's logical. That's your child. And if you don't have the, I'll say, intellectual wherewithal to know what people are trying to do to us, to have a historical understanding of what they have done, and to have a vision of empowerment of African people, then you're going to compromise your child and find a way to make it appear that it's not compromised. Okay, so mothers, and technically speaking, if you will, mothers are acting in a correct defensive posture relative to not knowing to protect their child. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't, it doesn't feel good. But at base level, at the level of theory, this is what's going on. They are trying to protect their sons. That hasn't gone anywhere. If the men who were most destroyed in this society, the African men who were most destroyed in this society, were those who were the most pacified, the weakest, the most gender confused, then African women would be trying to raise the exact opposite of that. But that's not what's going on. It's the exact opposite, because you are trying to destroy a people's men. If there are no warriors, then there is no threat. And there's nothing to move you in the direction of just straight up genocide. And of course, we know that homosexuality is a major part of that process, because homosexuality is not procreative. So you remove a population by their own choice because they have adopted sex styles that fit -0 and negative population growth. But I don't think, for the most part, that these mothers are to blame. My mother used to tell me when I was a child, you enlighten, you educate, you teach the ignorant, you ignore stupidity. And we're talking about a lot of ignorance. And to me, ignorance is not a bad word. I'm ignorant about a lot of things. So is anybody else who has the sense to admit it. So most people in our community don't have any serious historical or historical analysis. They don't have what's required to sit down and intelligently analyze this and do what they need to do, knowing what the odds are going to be against their survival, knowing that righteous rage is extremely important, knowing that being conscious about your destruction is extremely important, even if it means you don't live that long. But you were right in what you did, or that you don't become successful. I got all these people think I'm talking about we're going to die. No. But it's like, even if you don't become successful in their definition or other people's definition, you know that you were right. Our ancestors operated on those principles of being right, of being righteous. My father taught me that it doesn't make a difference if there's only you there. A man can stand alone. And what he meant was that it doesn't make a difference if there are 1 million of people against you, 10 million, 20 million, 100 million people against you. It doesn't make a difference. You still stand on what you know is right. And our people have become so weakened because of neediness and because of confusion, because of menticide, because of this tireless assault against us that wears people out, that makes them weary, that they're willing to accept things that under normal circumstances they would not consider in a zillion years. No, I assume that we'll still here. I guess someone's taking a little break.
Can I be heard, sir?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Groovy. I just said, again, it is an extreme privilege to have you on the program. I'm definitely going to be working hard to have you back on the program, because I also want to discuss sexual intercourse between white people and non-white people. I do think that is a big problem, and I want to have a whole different program to address that. But I wanted you to, because you said earlier that you don't even say European homosexuals, because for you they are synonyms. A lot of the white people who allege to be against racism, they also say, well, we're also against what they call homophobia, and we think people who are so-called gay, they're mistreated too, and we don't want to hear anybody talking bad about homosexual activity, and, you know, people are born that way. We think, you know, anybody who has something bad to say about that, you're some kind of a demon. If you could you really lay out why you say you feel this is a fundamental aspect of European culture, racist white supremacy culture, and you said you can just look back to Greco-Roman society. Could you really lay that out so that we get a thorough understanding of why you say that?
I will try. Before I do that, I will say that Europeans are notorious for covering both sides of whatever the debate is. And in the end, they end up defending themselves and protecting themselves. So to say, and even among Negroes and lost souls, this liberalism, it removes race as an issue. It's most evident in philosophically and theoretically in ideas like Marxism and liberalism, where everybody is human and worthy and all the rest of it. And we're not saying that anybody is not worthy. We're just saying that this is not African. I think that Europeans should practice homosexuality because that's a natural, normal part of who they are. I don't think that Africans should, because it's not a natural, normal part of who we are. Nowhere in any of the traditions that I have studied, and anybody who I know has studied, is there any evidence of homosexuality in traditional and ancient African society. They are trying to manufacture stuff now, but I say the same thing about that as I say to students. We know that we're dealing with liars. I give the examples to the students in terms of Europeans lying to us and convincing us things that are not true, like our intellectual inferiority based upon our skin color, which they quote-unquote proved scientifically. All the things that they have proven scientifically to us, but this thing is different. I said, if I had a best friend and I'd known this person for 40-some years and we were best friends, I would do anything for him, he would do anything for me, but I knew he was a chronic liar. So I checked out everything he said before I agreed to it or went along with whatever it was or accepted it as the truth. And if he came to me and he said, man, I swear, cross my heart, hand on the Bible, or my mother's grave, man, I swear, man, this time I'm telling you the truth, would I believe it? And all of the students who I talk to, every time I do this, they say no. And I say, well, why are we believing Europeans about some African origins of homosexuality? Or their Negro clones, or their workhorses within our community who are saying this to defend their European behavior. We go back and look at traditions of European society, we consistently see homosexuality, we consistently see bestiality, we see sadomasochism is part and parcel of their sexual behavior. Pain is very much a part of everything that they do, and sex is not something that's exempt from that. We see this evolving through the generations. We see the names of things that we do now, or we're aware of now, that have a European origin is just from the names. There are some, to me, just basic, commonsensical evidence that it has no African origins. Europeans, if they came to the continent and they were so puritanical and they were so, not to talk about, we didn't have to go into the area of their raping and all the rest of this stuff, but if they were so heterosexual, if they found Africans who were homosexual, who practiced bestiality, it would have been on the cover of every newspaper and scientific journal that they published, because they were trying to prove our inferiority. So that would have been on the cover. That would have been the talk of the town for years and years and years and years, and yet it is nowhere, absolutely nowhere in any of their material, any of their scientific material, any of their newspaper material. but you can consistently go through the lifetime of European people, and there is always homosexuality there. So the problem for me isn't with them. For me, you've had the development, in terms of my interpretation, you've had the development of different people within European society who maybe do not participate now, but they may be participating in the next generation, or skip the generation, or what have you, if you want to call it genetics, or you want to call it a religious thing, or what have you. But they cover all bases. So no matter who loses, they win, because they are part of everything, and they are seen as the scholars, the authorities, the beautiful people. So they are going to be protected. The question is only which side is going to win and who's going to be protecting them. When you look at traditional African society, again, this is completely and totally absent. Now, two of the greatest pieces of evidence of its absence is that African people have always been family-centered. Homosexuality is pedophilic at its heart, at its base. How can you have a family that is pedophilic, that has so much love and appreciation for its children, has a world that centers around its children, childbirth, procreation? How could you have a society like that with pedophiles? That would be a complete and total contradiction, for these people. Procreation is at the heart of it. You look at European mythology and you compare that to African mythology. All the European gods of significance were single or abusive to each other. Every single African divinity had a complementary pair. Okay? People will compare the Ankh and the cross as it's used in European Christianity today, because the circle, or the shape that resembles the circle, or the egg at the top of the Ankh, that's the woman's womb. The arms of the children, the bottom part of the Ankh is the phallic. It's a phallic symbol for the man. Europeans chopped that off and made it all male. So we're looking at differences in mythology. We're looking at differences in child-rearing practices. You look at the treatment of African people, of their elders, way back when, of couples way back then. I say people got divorced, people got separated, people died, but how they were how they were absorbed into the community, how the children were treated, how they were respected, how they were taught, how they were held at the center of everything, versus traditional European society. Many of the churches that were built in Australia were built by white orphanages. All you have to do is look at the mythology, the stories, the fictional stories, which are, fiction is a representation of what's real. So read Charles Dickens, and you will get a very good idea on how children were really treated in traditional African society. Look at what happened when they began to bring indentured servants over here, where they would, well, number one, you had two separate societies in terms of prostitution. So the sexual orientation of African people and what would be acceptable was quite different. You didn't have the word prostitution in African society, any language group, and whenever you have something, there's always a word that fits that. There was no word for prostitution in traditional African society. There was no word for prison in traditional African society. And speaking of words, of course, we have a lot of sisters in particular who want to use this word lesbian and walk around with it with great pride, as if it symbolizes them. And this is another evidence of people's ignorance over where words came from and European application of them. Lesbian, the word lesbian comes from the island of Lesbos, which they have changed the name of. It comes from the island of Lesbos. The island of Lesbos was not famous for homosexual European women. The island of Lesbos was internationally renowned because of the female prostitutes who stayed there and their reputation for performing oral sex on men. That was what the island was famous for. It wasn't famous for homosexuality. It was famous for prostitutes who performed oral sex on men. That was it. So I'm wondering exactly what it is out of that they're calling themselves. So we have so many different fundamental differences in the character of the people that make homosexuality in African society virtually impossible. And you have these people who will come up now with this manufactured example way over here among this teeny tiny people, this manufactured example, and they'll want to use those insignificant, even if they were real, examples to extrapolate, to infer from there to an entire African people. Okay, European people, that's interesting. This is the first time I thought about this. I have never heard a European deny that European people are homosexual. I've never heard that denied. I, of course, never heard it denied by, well, I have heard one African say, well, no, that's not true. But I've never heard or read anywhere where a European was in denial of that historical fact. Never.
Wow.
So it's like they have placed a debate in our lap, and we're arguing over the natural, not you and I, but we're arguing over the natural homosexuality of Europeans versus that of Africans, and they can just sit back and watch this create chaos in our community the same way they can put together two songs that pit African men against African women and African women against African men, and just sit back and watch the chaos it creates in intimate relationships between black men and black women. So it's like you're throwing fuel into a fire that you initiated when you begin to destroy people. You know, but I don't know of, I honestly don't know of maybe I just haven't read enough. I honestly don't know of any European who has made that claim.
Wow.
That to me says a lot, because they're not doing it. We're the ones that are saying it. We're the that are making the we're defending, and that's one of the things that Chris Welsing, Bobby E. Wright, Amos Wilson, John Henrik Clark, all these folks talked about how we are defending them and their right to turn us into them and to destroy us. They don't even have to do that. Sort of like a thing, well, we don't have to come in and kill you anymore. We can just dump a bunch of drugs and guns into your community and watch you do it to yourselves. We can rape some of you throughout time. Homosexuality, in terms of Europeans doing this to us, they had a practice during our enslavement in this country called buck breaking, where they would take the strongest of the males, the most rebellious of the males, and they would bring out the entire population of enslaved Africans on this plantation, and they would make this huge circle. And they would bring this guy out over a tree trunk that had been cut off, and they would have 2 or 3 of the black males who were strong or stronger than him together. They would strip him butt naked. They would take him, they would bend him over this tree stump, and the white master would rape him, sodomize him. He called it buck. I'm saying, what does, when you talk about breaking the spirit of people, causing, as in the Willie Lynch type idea, causing mothers to want to raise their sons up in a protective way, if I saw that and I was a mother, I think I'd give at least a second thought to raising him up to be a warrior, at least a warrior where everybody knows he's a warrior. I might train him to behave a certain way in public and another way in private, but I would give some second thought. Now, it's just the same way in public or private. There was a guy who was quoted in, I'm not sure, I think it was Essence Magazine when they were talking about the, and that's, I'm not applauding Essence Magazine, but they were interviewing this guy about, one of the professors about homosexuality in the islands. And this guy was talking about how if you had an enslaved African who was hard to control, he would be handed over to an overseer or a driver who was homosexual or homosexualized. And then he would just be systematically raped until he was broken.
Wow.
So these are things that now we're discovering because they were kept from us for a reason. because they wanted our perception of them to be different than what it is. Now when you have us at a certain point where we see them as a certain way, or we're just all human and all the rest of this, then you can begin to talk about this and say, oh, that was just our ancestors. That's not us. Okay, but they're bringing back the truth. And as they move us further through this school process, then more and more will be revealed about what they have done and what they continue to do, to a point where we think that we are them and this was what we did or we do. And since we did it before, well, it seems like it's good enough for us to do now. You know, so it wasn't just the women, but there's been no discussion of public intellectual dialogue about the rape of African men and boys during our enslavement, crossing the ocean, in the dungeons over there, on the coffle lines. No one talks about that, and we know why no one is talking about that, even though we know that it occurred because Europeans did not leave their homosexuality in Europe when they came to invade the continent. They didn't leave it there. And what you see now is a result of that. And what has been going on here? It's not a result of what Africans have always done. It's a result of what Europeans brought to the African continent. If we knew these things, we would be angry. We would be righteously enraged, and we would act accordingly. But they were smart enough to wait until we had thought or come to a point of thinking that we're one with them, so there would be no reason to be angry, because then you'd be getting angry at yourself for what you're doing to yourself, for what you're doing to your sons and to your daughters.
Again, real privilege to have our guest on today's program, Dr. Mwalimu K. Baruti. Please check the website, AquabenHouse.com. It is linked in the description to this program. Just click his name, and you can see all the books that he's written. Please get all of them if you can. Dr. Baruti, are you okay taking a couple callers?
Sure, as long as it's not silliness. Absolutely.
Oh, I agree. I think most of the folks who tend to listen to this program, they tend to be pretty serious and in the business of replacing white supremacy with justice. Let's see, 253, listener at 253, did you have a question for Dr. Baruti?
Sir, not at this time, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Love, Truth, and Liberation. She's also down there in Atlanta with you. Do you have a question for Dr. Baruti?
Yes, thank you. My question is, do you also see this effeminization and homosexuality as due to white supremacy coming out to our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean and in Africa? And I have a second question if there's time after that.
Yes, I do. It's even scarier for me there because of the level of economic dependency which allows Europeans to buy or to buy into what they want. The number of European females who are coming to the continent and claiming young boys, and to the islands to claim boys as their sex toys. It's very scary to me. People who are returning from the continent, they're telling me about these computer cafes where young African males are hooking up with white males while they're still up in Europe, and then they come down on vacation to be homosexualized. And prostitution is rampant in that area, particularly in Tanzania, South Africa. It's catching up with Thailand, which has the highest rate of child prostitution for any Bangkok, Thailand, of any city in the world. The other thing that scares me about that, and when I say scared, I mean scared. It's unbelievable that this could be happening, and there are only so many possible results from this. What we see going on in the continent in terms of the rate of the transformation of people's mind toward wanting to be European, the love of the European way, the love of how the European thinks and acts. It's like what happened to us in 50 years is happening there in 15 or 20 years, because the drive to move to be subintegrated into European society is so much greater. It's like you started out late in the race, so you're running faster than everybody else just to catch up. So I expect there to be some seriously negative effects. What has been done with at least a few of the dungeons that they kept us in before they put us on the slavers to cross the ocean over here, where one of them, the major one, it turned into essentially a gay club. And we assisted this process by having jazz concerts there, which to me is a horrific level of disrespect toward our ancestors, where you would take a place like that and want to dance the night away inside of it and be drunk and whatever else may go along with that. So yes, what I see there is atrocious, and even, how do I say, even more so because they're economically bound to the West. And the West has for a while attached homosexual rights, I love that word, rights, homosexual rights to financial aid, to government subsidies that come from the West. Okay. Trinidad and Tobago, they were holding out for a long time, and from my knowledge, they're still holding out, but the assault against them in terms of their aid from the West has been major, has had a major impact. The good thing is that in a number of these places, particularly in the islands, the strength against the homosexual movement is still extremely strong, much stronger there than it is in most of the communities here.
Okay, can I be heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. My second question is, I'm sure you've noticed all the homosexual women, African women in Atlanta too, and maybe could you talk about how that could be also caused by the white supremacy pressure in the area?
Oh, absolutely. There are a number of ways. One of the ways, though, has to do with the male-female ratio. When you have a people who are so sex-driven, sex being, if not the most important, one of the most important things in their lives in terms of play and everyday activities, where this is what you live for. And we have been trained in this way. Atlanta has the highest income-bringing thing in the city of Atlanta is the strip clubs. Sex is such a high priority and such a thing for people who, if you will, for the most part, are empty inside in terms of this being the norm and play. When that's the case, when there is a shortage of men, in terms of statistics, there are somewhere between 32 and 36 black men in this country for every black woman. And of course, these numbers get much, much higher when you talk about homosexualized black men, when you talk about black men who only date, only marry someone who's not, when you talk about black men who are in prison, when you talk about black men who aren't men, they're just males who either are playboys or never grew up and don't have the level of maturity that would qualify them as a man or as men. Then you have a over-surplus of women, and then you have a social movement that has been coming for a while now that's promoting the idea of homosexual behavior. So for you to reject that in many ways is for you to be uncool, for you to be square, for you to be straight. Interesting terminology. Straight means, you know, without any qualities, without any life to you, versus gay. So what I see here relative to just a male-female ratios would be expected. Even though you had significant male-female ratios before, and you didn't see this in this way, you also have a society, a culture that is regressing into everybody else, back into their roots, and people are adopting what is normal for them as normal for everyone else. So you would expect to see more and more of this. Also, just like male homosexuality Female homosexuality is significantly the result of sexual abuse when in childhood, or having a bad or violent, disastrous sexual relationship as an older child or as an adult. The majority of prostitutes on the streets were sexually abused as children. So when you have this situation, you have people running away from those things which terrorize them, and in some cases continue to terrorize them. It's amazing to me the number of homosexualized African women who work in these black women's shelters, who go there looking for victims, pretending that they're, trying to help, but they're looking for more women to homosexualize as well to have as partners, because homosexuality requires the constant, for the most part, requires constantly increasing number of partners as well as different partners. Some people, I'm sure, are saying, yeah, that's a bunch of malarkey, but the evidence is very different. The evidence shows that to be very, very true. We forget about the fact that one of the logics for homosexual relationships is that, well, a man knows a man better than a woman, and a woman knows a woman better than a man. Well, there's more domestic violence within homosexual relationships than there are within heterosexual relationships. But I expect it to continue to rise, because you have a lot of women who are on the prowl. They are looking for girls and other women to turn out. In a society where there's so much violence within relationships, and people have become so selfish and intolerant that they don't understand a relationship requires work and is a difficult thing, and the first difficulty they encounter, then they're upset and they want to leave and they've been mistreated, then you have a whole collection of individuals to pick and choose from in terms of that. And homosexuality appears to be one of those things that once you have participated in, it's something that you get caught and locked up in many cases. It's very difficult to get out of, because it does psychological things to you also. So I expect this movement to continue to grow all over. Wise people recognize the nature and magnitude of this. They recognize that this is a homosexual culture, that this is a homosexual society. So they expect that. But that does not lower their morale relative to what they're trying to do, because they know that they are correct. I mean, I don't think I need to remind people about European empires, and one of the most important indicators of their fall was sexual license, homosexuality in public, and just random orgies. All the rest of these things always preceded the fall of these societies. That's just a historical fact. And I don't want people to say, "Oh, well, that's exciting. Yeah, I can see that's coming," because there is no given time span for this to occur. It may take this another 30, 40, 50, 100 years. But in the meantime, how do we raise children so that they don't have to live in this insanity, do not have to participate in this insanity, because that glitter is enormous. That pull is enormous, even within the center community, among the children, in terms of being pulled away and pulled into that madness. It is enormous, and we need to focus our energies on protecting those who do not want to be involved in that, and those who have not become a part of that, and we don't want to become involved in that. But we should expect it to increase considerably.
Wow. 916, are you there with a call? 916? Did you have a question, or are you just listening? Okay. I think they are just listening. Thank you for tuning in. Someone called in at 111. 111, if you have a question, you are on the air. 111.
Hello, Dr. Baruti.
Yes, how you doing?
Hi. You touched on something that I was going to ask you about, and maybe I'll bring it up again. It's the last straw. I was going to ask you about cultures. It does seem like the last straw is the homosexuality that's that's the last thing tolerated, then the people seem to have like a revolution. I don't know if you want to speak on that anymore.
Well, yes, I would, because the question is, if that revolution occurs, will we be prepared to build something that's African, and will we have learned the lessons of who we're dealing with and be able to separate civilization from that? Because if that's part of what you rebuild, then you know that eventually it's going to return as a force to be reckoned with. We have to look at what is wrong and not rebuild the same thing. Of course, part of understanding what we need to rebuild comes from who we are as a people, which requires us to study our traditions. However, I would also caution us not to stop at homosexuality. I would suggest that we look at the last straw. I like the way you said that. The last straw, that final thing, is not being just limited to homosexuality, that also pedophilia is a part of that. All of these things reach a critical mass. Orgies. When you look back at Rome, you find Saturnalia, where you had a month where people just went out and had orgies all over the place. Where you have pedophilia going crazy, and now that we have a modern European society, then you can expect for this thing with children to get massive, get extremely large. The rate of child stealing out of Ethiopia, out of South Africa, Zania, out of the islands now, out of our communities here is, they say, over the top. It is beyond what I could have ever imagined in terms of what they do and what we're allowing them to do. So, yes, I would again agree that there are indicators. There, and intelligent people ought to be able to find indicators of all kinds of social phenomena, but those indicators may have to be even greater as the ability to ward off war or destruction have evolved too, because that learning has also occurred. It's not like we're talking in a vacuum and Europeans aren't listening to this conversation or haven't listened to the conversations about that, so they're quite aware of their history too. So they're doing everything in their power to make sure that that doesn't happen, because they want to remain in power as long as possible. That's what supremacy is all about, maintaining your dominance over other people for indefinitely or for as long as you can. So it's like you have warriors out here, revolutionaries out here who are having conversations and talking in public and doing things as if Europeans aren't listening, can't hear them. They are clear on what we're about, and they're clear on what they're about. They're not confused. They're not oblivious to this. They know exactly what's going on. The Central Intelligence Agency is just one aspect of that information gathering. So when we look at the indicators, we have to update them based upon the level of newly accumulated, if you will, sophistication, as well as the number of people who are involved, because we could understand this world as the empire that they have decided on, and if that's the case and that becomes reality, then it's going to take a while before the world becomes in such a homosexualized state that things begin to fall apart.
Someone else called in at 111. Other caller at 111, did you have a question for Dr. Baruti?
No, very constructive program. I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. I believe that is Cree, Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer. Excellent program right here at Blog Talk Radio. Please support her efforts to replace white supremacy with justice. Guess we'll get the last one. 310, caller at 310. Did you have a question for Dr. Baruti?
Yes. Actually, I have one comment and then a question. I just wanted to throw this out there to both of you and anybody else that might be listening. I have been doing some research. It's not quite scientific, but from what I have been able to discover, there are only two active characters on a regular series program in the current season that regularly appear in dresses, men, and they're both black. RuPaul and Phil Lewis. So that's kind of interesting. I think it underscores, exactly what is going on. So that's my comment. My question is this. Doctor, you mentioned menticide. You mentioned people looking out of themselves, for themselves. You mentioned, that unfortunately in some instances we disrespect our ancestors. You mentioned that we need to study our traditions. I wanted to ask you, do you think it's possible for black men in America to counteract emasculinization and white supremacy without being aware and proud of their heritage?
No, I don't. That's a very interesting question. I've never been asked that, but it's been coming. I don't think so, because it's like everyone is going to have in general speaking, everyone's going to have a particular cultural orientation. I don't believe, as a student of humanity, if you will, that people can operate without a culture. I've never heard of that. I can't imagine it happening, because everyone has culture. And in the world that we live in today, there are, dominant cultures. There are large cultures, some in conflict with each other, some not. I shouldn't use it in such large terms, because then people start getting confused, and they start saying that different people on the African continent have different cultures, when it's not different cultures, it's just different ethnicities. In order for us to become who we're supposed to be, we have to take who we have always been and adjust it to the battlefield that we're on now. It's as simple as, let's say, military strategies and technologies. Africans, our most important shape is a circle. So whenever you study African military technologies and strategies, you find the circle dominant in those. European military technologies primarily involve the square or a straight line. And whenever you study European military strategies and technologies, then you find that dominates. There's a reason why. We say that tradition is what works for you as a people. For us, it was custom designed over thousands and thousands and thousands of years of our social evolution, where we came to understand who we were, what we were supposed to be about as a people, how we were reflected in the universe, how we're supposed to view this world, the Sasaya, Mother Earth, how we're supposed to operate here. So in order for us to be men by definition, in order for sisters to be women by definition, it has to fit within the model that was established by our ancestors. We are our ancestors. That's to me another major part of the equation, and that's something that people want to deny, especially those who want to leave Europeans innocent of what they have done. We are ancestors, just like I'm my mom and my dad, and they're their mom and their dad, and all the way back. And we are ancestors. And then we can get into discussion of Europeans in the bloodline through rape, whether that rape was voluntary or not. But we are ancestors in terms of our spirit and in terms of what works for us. And Europeans are their ancestors in terms of their spirit, or some people might say spiritlessness, and what works for them. So if we're going to, the only way that we could be men without going back to our traditions and finding out what the definition of manhood is within those traditions, the only way we can do that is to commit treason against our ancestors, to disrespect our ancestors. If I may suggest, I wrote a book called Asafo, which is a warrior's guide to manhood, which talks about a lot of that. There's also a book that's in the works now, which is supposed to be, I should be finished with it, should be published this coming November, and it's entitled Iwa, spelled I-W-A, a warrior's character. And those discussions are grounded in the definition of manhood within the tradition of African people. We've got to remove the idea of tradition as being something old, archaic, outdated, outmoded, way back then. Tradition is what will always work for people. You may change your type of clothes that you wear because the environment may change, or you may relocate from a mountainous area to a plains area, and then some things change in terms of the technology that you use, but that technology is still going to be dictated by the kind of people that you are, the kind of mind that you have, the kind of spirit that you are. So if we're talking about African manhood, if we're talking about black manhood, then it has to fall in line with the manhood of our traditions and what kind of men we are supposed to create as based upon who we know ourselves to be.
Outstanding. I want to thank you, Dr. Baruti, for taking some time out of your Wednesday evening to share with us. I think it has been extremely constructive. I, again, want to give the web address, acobinhouse.com. Please go there. You can get all of his books, including Homosexuality and the Effeminization of Afrikan Males. I want to give you the last word. If there's anything you'd like to say to our listening audience before we sign out, go right ahead, sir.
Well, Brother Gus, I appreciate the offer. I mean, and I tell people all the time, I just got finished speaking up in D.C., I don't think people understand when someone who, like myself, who sees his mission as a worker for the people, when people invite me to come and be part of a honest, critical, developing discussion, it is an enormous honor, and I am very grateful for you having allowed me into this space. So my kudos go out to you for having this on. This takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to stand up against people who are trying to destroy you in an anti-African world. So I definitely appreciate being on. I really appreciate the questions. And I look forward to coming back.
For sure. Definitely want to have you back. As I said, the sexual intercourse between white people and non-white people, that is something we talk about a lot. I feel that it's extremely incorrect and damaging for black people, victims of racism, white supremacy. And, yeah, I will be getting in touch with you to have you back as soon as possible to discuss that topic. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Baruti. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Fantastic broadcast. I could not be more thankful for having you for the 100th broadcast here at the Cows. Thank you so much, and I will definitely be in touch with you soon, sir.
Okay. You take care.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Hope everyone enjoyed the broadcast. Please check the website, acobinhouse.com. All you have to do is click Dr. Baruti's name. If you are listening here at Blog Talk Radio, just click his name. It'll take you right to the website, and you can see all the books that he's authored, check out information. Excellent website. Hope the program was constructive for folks listening in. The book that he was referencing earlier in the broadcast, where he talked about the black male being at a black college, and he got in trouble, got kicked out, and the black professor kicked him out and gave him a letter that said keep him running. That is Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Excellent book. Lots of white supremacy. I believe that book has been mentioned repeatedly on this program. I know Dr. Martin Kevorkian spoke about it. Just incredible symbolism. There's sexual intercourse between a white person and a non-white person in that book. I would highly recommend it. Excellent illustration of racism, white supremacy. It starts with a battle royal. If you want to talk about homosexual activity, a group of white men get a collection of black boys together to have a fight, and they throw coins at them in the ring, and the last person standing wins, and he gets all the coins. But very homoerotic beginning. Yeah, you just have to check it out. I'm not sharing all the information about things that happen at the beginning, but when you read it, the homoerotic nature of this activity, which did really happen, it'll jump out at you when you go to read. One more thing I did want to share as well. I hope Haiti was not lost on the listeners. Dr. Baruti spoke frequently about pedophilia and this homosexual activity having a predatory nature to attack children. I hope Haiti is not lost on the listeners. These white people, the ones that you know about, not even counting the ones that you don't know about, but certainly the ones that you know about that are going to Haiti and snatching up these kids, you should be highly suspicious that there's most likely some pedophilia going on down there. White people make movies about going to Haiti to sexually exploit black people. I believe one of them is Heading South. It is subtitled. It's in French, but it talks about white women going down to exploit black males, and one white woman, she even says that she went down and found this black boy. He was no more than 14, 15 years old, and she, according to her own testimony in the film, raped him. And she just went every year for the summer. That was her fling, to go down to Haiti and sexually molest these black people who, as Dr. Baruti said, are poor. I mean, they're impoverished. They got very limited options. This is a way for a lot of them to make money, to improve their quality of life. So I hope Haiti is not lost on people who listen to this broadcast. Before I sign out, I also wanted to just give you something to think about in terms of just listening to words. I try to point out when Tim Wise, when he uses the word fair, F-A-I-R, what is incorrect about equating fair with accuracy or justness, that is incorrect, and I believe an act of racism, and specifically with Mr. Tim Wise, I believe it is a conscious act of racism, because I have prompted him about that repeatedly, at least three times, and he continues to do it. So just paying attention to words. Some of these are just hip-hop artist names, black male entertainers: Baby, Rich Boy, Lil Jon, and the East Side Boys, Ghetto Boys, and what they call gangbanging. A lot of these terms sound very effeminate, very homoerotic. Just pay attention. It's rife. You'll see it every day when you start paying closer attention to details, images. It's as explicit as Tyler Perry and the image that is attached to the description of this program. It's also in very subtle ways as well. Just the number of black entertainers, musicians I'm thinking about that reference themselves as boy or young, very effeminate, not quite equating themselves with manhood, being a man in the system of white supremacy. As Mr. Fuller said, black males, the most impotent creatures in the form of people in the system of racism, white supremacy, and I unfortunately agree and qualify myself. I, again, still do not have a phone or a computer. I think that is going to do it. I'm not doing a long discussion today because I want to go put my feet up and prepare. I did want to let folks know two programs this weekend. On Saturday, I'm real excited. Saturday, we have a victim of racism, white supremacy from the area of the world known as the United Kingdom. She has been experiencing a lot of mistreatment on her job by suspected racists, and she evolved her counter-racism code on the job and got skilled enough to where she was able to stop a lot of her mistreatment and get the help that she needed on the job. She's going to be here Saturday morning. That will be February 27th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central on Saturday the 27th. And I know I have a lot of UK listeners, so for you all that will be 6 p.m. Saturday, February 27th. If you're in the UK, that will be 6 p.m. London time. this Saturday. Should be very interesting. I posted, the description's already up. You can go to counter-racism.com and you can read about what she has been experiencing on the other side of the planet under the system of white supremacy. Very interesting, but she'll be here on Saturday. Before that, this Friday, February 26th, I believe Lauren Ashley, victim of racism, white supremacy, she'll be hanging out. We'll be having a discussion about black people specifically not being honest and how that reflects our pathetic situation in the system of racism, white supremacy. That'll be Friday. I believe we're going to go Friday at, it'll be a late one, so I guess if you're on the East Coast, this will be Saturday morning, 2 a.m., if you're Central, this will be Saturday morning, 1 a.m., and if you are Pacific, that will be Friday at 11 p.m. So late show, Friday night, tune in. Lauren Ashley will be chatting, should be constructive. Definitely thank you to, this show has a heavy East Coast fan base. I have noted that, so I try to always give the East Coast time first because it does seem like we have a lot more folks listening on the East Coast. So definitely thank you for supporting way over there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we do have a lot of California listeners as well. So everybody listening in California, thank you. Love the Golden State. Woohoo. That's going to wrap it up. I hope the program has been constructive. 100th broadcast here from Blog Talk Radio for the COWS context of white supremacy. Justice's email address, justice.asap@yahoo.com. One more time, justice.asap@yahoo.com. Please shoot her an email. I believe she'll be back for this weekend's programs. But shoot her an email, let her know you missed her, and hope she's doing well. I'm going to make sure, as I sign off, I'm going to make sure I do the Will Smith again, because I thought that was very important, and I missed the film. Will Smith, just looking at some of his films, you can do this, go on Internet Movie Database. I, Robot, he does not get the girl. He does not have a girlfriend. He does not have offspring. All he has is a grandmother, Manny figure, who is in the kitchen the whole time, pretty much, baking pies. And he pretty much sulks for the duration of the film about the white girl who died. The robot jumped in the water to save him, and not the white girl, that he pretty much sulks about this for the duration of the film. That is I, Robot, Pursuit of Happiness. The woman leaves him, poverty, nothing. He's sleeping on the floor in a bathroom with his offspring. It does turn out better for him. He does get a job, but I pointed out consistently that for most black males, victims of racism, white supremacy, that story is going to be pretty far removed from their reality. But that is Pursuit of Happiness. Bad Boys, again, highlighting boys, not men, Bad Boys, with Martin Lawrence, famous for not only his sitcom playing Shanae, a black female, but also Big Mama's House. Will Smith, keeping it going, 7 pounds. Basically, the film is resolved with him committing suicide, killing himself so that he might aid the other folks in the film, most of whom were white people, certainly much lighter, not black people. I Am Legend film, again, resolved with Will Smith killing himself so that the white people might live and prosper. Hancock film is resolved with Will Smith, the black male, leaving planet Earth. He is on the moon so that the white woman and white man can enjoy their lives and have a successful and happy relationship. And definitely the creme de la creme, 6 Degrees of Separation. Make sure you watch that film because you will actually get to see Will Smith engaging in homosexual behavior. Let me make sure I repeat that because I know some of you all are younger and missed this film. I'll actually give you a moment in racism as I sign off. I found out about this film when I got focused on sexual intercourse between white people and non-white people. I just started going around and asking people, can you think of some films where you see sexual intercourse between white people and non-white people? And at first, folks said, well, I can't think of anything, I can't think of anything. And then gradually it became, oh, wait a minute, yeah, I can, such and such, and such and such, and such and such. I had one black male I told, and at first he said, I couldn't think of any, I can't think of any. After a while, he had boatloads. And I mean, he just kept, every time I saw him, he'd be like, oh yeah, and this one, and this one, and this one. He told me about 6 Degrees of Separation, and he put an asterisk on that one, like, you gotta watch this one, Gus. This is crazy. He's with a white man. It's graphic. You can see it. Make sure you watch that one, 6 Degrees of Separation. Will Smith. That was the film that launched his big movie career. A lot of white people say that. This film came out in the early 90s, 6 Degrees of Separation. Make sure you watch that film. But that's just Will Smith's career in addition to all the other folks that we named. Yeah, I hope it's been constructive. Please check out Cree's site, Counter Racist Evolving Engineer. Her blog is cree7.wordpress.com. Very constructive program here at Blog Talk Radio. Please check out Back of the Bus, nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. Again, nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'm going to double check because I think people have been sending me messages to make sure I'm not supposed to say anything before I sign off. I think, yes, I can. Yes, okay. No messages. I can sign off comfortably. Lauren Ashley and Gus T Renegade will be here on Friday. If you're on the East Coast, that'll be Saturday morning, 2 a.m. If you're on the West Coast, that'll be Friday evening, 11 p.m. Replace the system of racism, white supremacy with a system of justice as soon as possible. And yeah, I'm going to play this again to make sure we get as much constructive information as possible before the program goes out. Yeah, I'll end with this one. Please forgive the noise. I'll end with this one and, yeah, call it a program.
The most impotent creature in the form of a person on this planet is a black male. Period. No matter where on the planet they are. The most powerless person is a black male. The most powerless person on the planet in the form of a person is a black male person.